Hey family, this is day 32 of our Reading Through the Bible Together in a Year series. We finally made it to the second month of the year, February. Congratulations, you've stuck with me this far. I've barely stuck with me this far. um, however, today what we're getting into is Leviticus chapters 13 and 14, both pretty long chapters. We're right in the middle of Levitical law when it comes to sacrifice, cleanliness, and uncleanliness. We started into uncleanliness and cleanliness yesterday, and so we're having a lot more of that today. And so let's see what happens. And the Lord said to Moshe and Aaron, if a man has on his skin a growth or a mark or a white place, and it becomes the disease of a leper, let him be taken to Aaron the priest or to one of the priests, his sons. And if, when the priest sees the mark on his skin, the hair on the place is turned white, and the mark seems to go deeper than the skin, it is the mark of a leper. And the priest, after looking at him, will say that he is unclean. But if the mark on his skin is white and does not seem to go deeper than the skin, and the hair on it is not turned white, then the priest will keep him shut up for 7 days. And the priest is to see him on the 7th day, and if, in his opinion, the place on the skin has not become worse and is not increased in size, then the priest will keep him shut up for 7 days more. And the priest is to see him again on the 7th day, and if the mark is less bright and is not increased on his skin, then let the priest say that he is clean. It is only a skin mark, and after his clothing has been washed, he will be clean. But if the size of the mark on his skin is increased after he has been seen by the priest, let him go to the priest again. And if, after looking at him, he sees that the mark is increased on his skin, let the priest say that he is unclean, he is a leper. When the disease of a leper is seen on a man, let him be taken to the priest. And if the priest sees that there is a white growth on the skin, and the hair is turned white, and there is diseased flesh in the growth, it is an old disease in the skin of his flesh, and the priest will say that he is unclean. He will not have to be shut up, for he is clearly unclean. And if the disease comes out all over his skin, from his head to his feet, as far as the priest is able to see, and if the priest sees that all his flesh is covered with the leprosy, the priest will say that he is clean. It is all turned white. He is clean. But whenever diseased flesh is seen on him, he will be unclean. And when the priest sees the diseased flesh, he will say that he is unclean. The diseased flesh is unclean. He is a leper. Or if the diseased flesh is turned again and changed to white, then he is to come to the priest. And the priest will see him. And if the place is turned white, then the priest will say that he is free from the disease. And if a bad place has come out on his skin and is well again, and on the same place there is a white growth of a bright mark, red and white, then let the priest see it. And after looking at it, if it seems to go deeper than the skin, and the hair on it is turned white, then the priest will say that the man is unclean. It is the leper's disease. It has come out in the bad place. But if, after looking at it, he sees that there are no white hairs on it, and it is not deeper than the skin, and it is not very bright, then let the priest keep him shut up for 7 days. And if it is increasing on the skin, the priest will say that he is unclean. It is a disease. But if the bright mark keeps in the same place and gets no greater, it is the mark of an old wound, and the priest will say that he is clean. Or if there is a burn on the skin of the flesh, and if the diseased flesh in the burn becomes a bright place, red and white or white, the priest is to see it. And if the hair on the bright place is turned white and it seems to go deeper than the skin, he is a leper. It has come out in the burn, and the priest will say that he is unclean. It is the leper's disease. But if, after looking at it, the priest sees that there is no white hair on the bright place, and it is not deeper than the skin, and it is not very bright, then let the priest keep him shut up for 7 days. And the priest is to see him again on the 7th day. If it is increased in the skin, then the priest will say that he is unclean. It is the leper's disease. And if the bright place keeps the same size and gets no greater on the skin, but is less bright, it is the effect of the burn, and the priest will say that he is clean. It is the mark of a burn. And when a man or a woman has a disease on the head or in the hair of the chin, then the priest is to see the diseased place. And if it seems to go deeper than the skin, and if there is a thin yellow hair in it, then the priest will say that he is unclean. He has the mark of a leper's disease on his head or in the hair of his chin. And after looking at the diseased place, if it does not seem to go deeper than the skin, and there is no black hair in it, then the priest will have him shut up for 7 days. And on the 7th day the priest will see the place, and if it is not increased, and there is no yellow hair in it, and it does not seem to go deeper than the skin, then his hair is to be cut off, but not on the diseased place, and he is to be shut up for 7 days more. And on the 7th day the priest will see the place, and if it is not increased and does not seem to go deeper than the skin, the priest will say that he is clean, and after his clothing has been washed he will be clean. But if the disease in his skin becomes worse after he has been made clean, then the priest is to see him, and if the mark is increased, the priest, without looking for the yellow hair, will say that he is unclean. But if, in his opinion, the growth has stopped, and black hair has come up on it, the disease has gone. He is clean, and the priest will say that he is clean. And if a man or a woman has bright marks on the skin of their flesh, that is, bright white marks, then the priest is to see them, and if the white marks on their skin are not very bright, it is a skin disease which has come out on the skin. He is clean. And if a man's hair has come out and he has no hair, still he is clean. And if the hair has gone from the front part of his head, so that he has no hair there, still he is clean. But if on his head or on his brow, where he has no hair, there is a red and white place, it is the disease of the leper coming out on his head or on his brow. Then if the priest sees that the growth of the disease has become red and white on his head or on his brow where there is no hair, like the mark of the skin of the leper, he is a leper and unclean. The priest is to say that he is most certainly unclean. The disease is in his head. And the leper who has the disease on him is to go about with signs of grief, with his hair loose and his mouth covered, crying, "Unclean, unclean." While the disease is on him, he will be unclean. He is unclean. Let him keep by himself, living outside the tent circle. And any clothing of wool or of linen in which is the mark of the disease, if it is in the threads of the linen or of the wool, or in leather, or in anything made of skin, if there are red or green marks on the clothing, or on the leather, or in the threads of the cloth, or in anything made of skin, it is the leper's disease. Let the priest see it, and after it has been seen by the priest, the thing which is so marked is to be shut up for 7 days, and he is to see the mark on the 7th day. If the mark is increased on the clothing, or in the threads of the material, or in the leather, whatever the leather is used for, it is the disease biting into it. It is unclean. And the clothing, or the wool, or linen material, or anything of leather in which is the disease, is to be burned. For the disease is biting into it, let it be burned with fire. And if the priest sees that the mark is not increased in the clothing, or in any part of the material, or in the leather, then the priest will give orders for the thing on which the mark is to be washed, and to be shut up for 7 days more. And if after the mark has been washed, the priest sees that the color of it is not changed and it is not increased, it is to be burned in the fire. The disease is working in it, though the damage may be inside or outside. And if the priest sees that the mark is less bright after the washing, then let him have it cut out of the clothing, or the leather, or from the threads of the material. And if the mark is still seen in the clothing, or in the threads of the material, or in the leather, it is the disease coming out. The thing in which the disease is will have to be burned with fire. And the material of the clothing, or anything of skin, which has been washed, if the mark has gone out of it, let it be washed a second time, and it will be clean. This is the law about the leper's disease in the thread of wool or linen material, in clothing or in anything of skin, saying how it is to be judged clean or unclean. And the Lord said to Moshe, "This is the law of the leper on the day when he is made clean. He is to be taken to the priest, and the priest is to go outside the tent circle, and if, after looking, the priest sees that the mark of the disease has gone from him, then the priest is to give orders to take for him who is to be made clean 2 living clean birds and some cedar wood and red thread and hyssop. And the priest will give orders for one of the birds to be put to death in a vessel made of earth, overflowing water. And he will take the living bird and the wood and the red thread and the hyssop and put them in the blood of the bird which was put to death, overflowing water. And shaking it 7 times over the man who is to be made clean, he will say that he is clean, and will let the living bird go free into the open country. And he who is to be made clean will have his clothing washed and his hair cut, and have a bath, and he will be clean. And after that he will come back to the tent circle, but he is to keep outside his tent for 7 days. And on the 7th day he is to have all the hair cut off his head, and his chin, and over his eyes. All his hair is to be cut off. And he will have his clothing washed and his body bathed in water, and he will be clean. And on the 8th day let him take 2 male lambs without any marks on them, and 1 female lamb of the first year without a mark, and 3/10 parts of an ephah of the best meal, mixed with oil, and 1 log of oil. And the priest who is making him clean will put the man who is being made clean, together with these things, before the door of the tent of meeting. And the priest is to take one of the male lambs and give it as an offering for wrongdoing, and the log of oil, waving them for a wave offering before the Lord. And he is to put the male lamb to death in the place where they put to death the sin offering and the burnt offering in the holy place. For as the sin offering is the property of the priest, so is the offering for wrongdoing. It is the most holy. And let the priest take some of the blood of the offering for wrongdoing and put it on the point of the right ear of him who is to be made clean, and on the thumb of his right hand, and on the great toe of his right foot. And take some of the oil and put it in the hollow of his left hand. And let the priest put his right finger in the oil which is in his left hand, shaking it out with his finger 7 times before the Lord. And of the rest of the oil which is in his hand, the priest will put some on the point of the right ear of the man who is to be made clean, and on the thumb of his right hand, and on the great toe of his right foot, over the blood of the offering for wrongdoing. And the rest of the oil in the priest's hand he will put on the head of him who is to be made clean, and so the priest will make him free from sin before the Lord. And the priest will give the sin offering, and take away the sin of him who is to be made clean from his unclean condition. And after that he will put the burned offering to death. And the priest is to have the burned offering and the meal offering burned on the altar. And the priest will take away his sin, and he will be clean. And if he is poor and not able to get so much, then he may take 1 male lamb as an offering for wrongdoing, to be waved to take away his sin, and 1/10 part of an ephah of the best meal mixed with oil for a meal offering, and a log of oil, and 2 doves or 2 young pigeons, such as he is able to get, and one will be for a sin offering, and the other for a burnt offering. And on the 8th day he will take them to the priest, to the door of the tent of meeting before the Lord, so that he may be made clean. And the priest will take the lamb of the offering for wrongdoing and the oil, waving them for a wave offering before the Lord. And he will put to death the lamb of the offering for wrongdoing, and the priest will take some of the blood of the offering for wrongdoing, and put it on the point of the right ear of him who is to be made clean, and on the thumb of his right hand, and on the great toe of his right foot. And the priest will put out some of the oil in the hollow of his left hand, shaking out drops of oil with his right finger before the Lord 7 times. And the priest will put some of the oil which is in his hand on the point of the ear of the man who is to be made clean, and on the thumb of his right hand, and on the great toe of his right foot, on the place where the blood of the offering for wrongdoing was put. And the rest of the oil which is in the priest's hand he will put on the head of him who is to be made clean, to take away his sin before the Lord. And he will make an offering of one of the doves or young pigeons, such as he is able to get. And of these he will give one for a sin offering, and one for a burnt offering, with the meal offering. And the priest will take away the sin of him who is to be made clean before the Lord. This is the law for the man who has the disease of the leper on him, and who is not able to get that which is necessary for making himself clean. And the Lord said to Moshe and Aaron, When you have come into the land of Canaan, which I will give you for your heritage, if I put the leper's disease on a house in the land of your heritage, then let the owner of the house come and say to the priest, It seems to me that there is a sort of leper's disease in the house. And the priest will give orders for everything to be taken out of the house before he goes in to see the disease, so that the thing in the house may not become unclean. And then the priest is to go in to see the house, and if he sees that the walls of the house are marked with hollows of green and red, and if it seems to go deeper than the face of the wall, then the priest will go out of the door of the house, and keep the house shut up for 7 days. And the priest is to come again on the 7th day, and have a look and see if the mark on the walls of the house are increased in size. Then the priest will give orders to them to take out the stones in which the disease is seen, and put them out into an unclean place outside the town. And he will have the house rubbed all over inside, and the paste which is rubbed off will be put out into an unclean place outside the town. And they will take other stones and put them in place of those stones, and he will take other paste and put it on the walls of the house. And if the disease comes out again in the house after he has taken out the stones and after the walls have been rubbed and the new paste put on, then the priest will come and see it. And if the disease in the house is increased in size, it is the leper's disease working out in the house. It is unclean. And the house will have to be pulled down, the stones of it and the wood and the paste, and everything is to be taken out to an unclean place outside the town. And in addition, anyone who goes into the house at any time while it is shut up will be unclean until evening. And anyone who has been sleeping in the house will have to have his clothing washed, and anyone who takes food in the house will have to have his clothing washed. And if the priest comes in and sees that the disease is not increased after the new paste has been put on the house, then the priest will say that the house is clean, because the disease is gone. And in order to make the house clean, let him take 2 birds and cedar wood and red thread and hyssop, and put one of the birds to death in a vessel of earth overflowing water, And take the cedar wood and the hyssop and the red thread and the living bird and put them in the blood of the dead bird and in the flowing water, shaking it over the house 7 times. And he will make the house clean with the blood of the bird and the flowing water and with the living bird and with the cedar wood and the hyssop and the red thread. But he will let the living bird go out of the town into the open country, so he will take away sin from the house, and it will be clean. This is the law for all signs of the leper's disease, and for skin diseases, and for signs of disease in clothing or in a house, and for a growth or a bad place or a bright mark on the skin, to make clear when it is unclean and when it is clean. This is the law about the disease of the leper. More cleanliness and uncleanliness, and a lot of it. A lot of stuff, a lot of repetition, a lot of really odd concepts and just weird things. Hard stuff to just get through. That was probably one of the hardest day readings that I've done so far. But it was a serious matter. And I what I said yesterday about there is a difference between sinful and unsinful and clean and unclean. This is true. I mean that. One thing that you'll notice in that chapter, though, is that it does talk about after the unclean period going and making a sin offering, right? So that the sin will be away from you. It's not that sin and sinful and clean and unclean are always separate. That's not true at all. I'm saying that something can become unclean and it has nothing to do with sin. But sin and bad things do make things unclean. I mean, that's one of the cleansing. Atonement is part of the uncleansing process. The cleansing process. It's part of the cleansing process. So I wasn't super clear about that. But hey, if you're curious about that, why don't you go study about it? It's really interesting stuff. The book of the Leviticus is very interesting. So take that with you. Give yourself a challenge. What does it mean, the unclean, clean, atonement, all of that? Think about that as you have a wonderful day.